Hey, it's Kate, and y'all, whoo, this one was a doozy. I haven't done this hairstyle in probably a year, and I must have blocked it out of my memory because I was on the struggle bus, but I managed to get it done for y'all, and so I edited out a lot of uh, the struggle so that you wouldn't be feeling too sorry for me. So I got a great tip from one of my subscribers. She suggested using a curved needle for this tutorial, and it is a game changer. I'm so happy that I tried this out. I loved it, and it really made sewing the buns on so much easier. And so I'll be demonstrating that in this tutorial as well. So thank you so much for joining me, and let's get started. I'm going to start by measuring across the top of the doll's head. From ear to ear, it's about 5 inches, and then I'm going to mark that distance on a piece of paper and do about 40 loops of yarn around my elbow and cut one end. And I'm just going to sew right down the middle of this bunch of yarn, keeping it between those two lines, and I'm finger combing it before I lay it down to sew. And when I begin sewing, I press in, and then I just kind of naturally let it spread out, making sure there aren't any gaps between the yarn. And once I get to the end, I'm going to leave my needle down and turn my piece of paper and go back over it 2 more times. And I do this so that my weft will not stretch, it just stays the same length, and that helps my process. And once I get across the 3rd time, I just do a back stitch to secure that end. And I'm going to tear this paper off. It tears off really easily now that we've gone over it 3 times. And I'm ready to do my second weft. And I'm going to measure down the back of the doll's head. It's about 6 centimeters. And just do the same process with about 30 loops of yarn. And the amount of yarn you use is going to vary depending on how thick your yarn is. So a lot of it is trial and error, I have to confess. But this is a pretty standard thickness of yarn, and so hopefully that helps. But again, I just went over that 3 times and did a back stitch, and I'm ready to attach my yarn wefts. I'm starting with the longer weft, and I'm just going to pin it on the side seam of the doll's head on each end of this weft. And then I'm going to part the doll's hair in the middle just to see where it is so that I can situate the hairline before I sew the weft on. And I'm going to put a few more pins in. I try to use brightly colored pins so that none of the pins get lost or forgotten in the doll's hair. That can be a disaster, so we don't want that. But I'm ready to sew, and I'm going to use acrylic yarn to sew on my weft because it's a similar color to the yarn I'm using, and I can just separate it out like embroidery thread. I do 2 strands and not one end. And if you don't want to use yarn, you can use upholstery thread, which is kind of weird, but it comes in a lot of colors and it is really sturdy and does not tangle easily. So I'm just hiding that knot in the hair, and I'm going to do an anchoring back stitch right here on the end of this seam. And then I'll do a diagonal back stitch, and that really just wraps around this seam and secures this weft really well. And I'm just going to work my way from one end of the weft to the other with this diagonal stitch. And if you want to see this process slowed down, I have another tutorial that I will link in the description, and it's a lot more thorough and step-by-step. And so I'm getting to the end here, and I'm just going to put in a couple of anchoring stitches to secure the end of this seam, and then I'm going to snag a little spot of fabric right at the right where the yarn comes out, and wrap my yarn thread around it and pull it through to knot it. And I can just leave that yarn tail long, and it blends in with the other yarn here. So now I'm going to work on the second weft. This goes down the back of the center of the doll's head, and it makes a T with the first weft and just kind of barely overlaps with it there at the beginning. And I'm just going to pin this right down the middle. I'm just trimming up my thread tails that I forgot, and I'm ready to sew this on. And I'm going to do it the same way I did the first one, just hiding my knot in the yarn hair and starting with an anchoring back stitch. And I'm going to make these diagonal stitches a little bit smaller and just make sure they kind of hide that center seam. I used white thread, but it does also help to use a thread that's kind of close to the color of your yarn hair so that you don't have to be so careful hiding that center seam. So I'm getting to the end here, and again, just putting in a couple of extra stitches at the end to secure it, and I'm going to tie it off the same way. And now I'm ready to style this doll's hair. I'm not really ready, but I give it my best. So I'm separating out the back of the doll's hair before I begin. And I'm just twisting a piece at the top and leaving some kind of wispy pieces down the side of the face. And I'm just adding pieces as I go down this twist, and I'm going to secure it right there where the ear would be. And I'm just working these pins in to kind of hold it in place before I start sewing. And it's fiddly, y'all, you know. Yarn hair is fiddly. I've said it before. It never does the same thing twice, so go easy on yourself if you decide to try this one. It's tough. It is. But so I'm just making sure my yarn thread goes with the slant of this twist, so it just kind of blends in as I put my stitches in. And I'm working my way down to that kind of ear area, and then I'll put that third stitch coming out right under, and I'll tie off that first attachment. And depending on how secure you want this hairstyle to be, this next part is somewhat optional, I would say. I will take that bottom half of this side of the hair that I have in my left hand, and I'm going to tie it just below where I want to secure it to the head, and then I'm going to sew across it right above the spot where I tie it. And this just ensures that it's very secure. So, you know, maybe if a child might be playing with the doll that you're making, this might be a good idea. It's not the easiest thing, I have to admit. It takes some muscle to get this part through your machine, but it really makes it that much more secure. So I'm just going to turn the doll on its back and sew right above that tied spot. And I just make the yarn as compact as possible, and then I'll backstitch over it and go forward over it again. I actually did it a couple of times. And take that paper off. And I'm going to fold this seam in half and sew it in place. See how it's loose right there? I'm just going to fold it under, and that kind of tightens the loose area, and I'm going to sew that right there with my yarn thread. And I'm just hiding the knot as close to that sewn area as I can. And I'm going to trim those yarn pieces that I just sewed on. And now I'm going to take this front portion of the hair that's loose, and I'm going to twist it under and wrap it around into a bun. And I'm going to make sure it's long enough to tuck under that bun. And then I'm going to sew again across this spot at the end, so that, again, it's just really secure when I sew the bun on, and there aren't any pieces just randomly coming loose. Sewing it just really secures it really well. And so I'm tucking that end under the bun, and I'm going to pin this in place and start sewing with my curved needle. Kind of exciting. I wasn't quite used to it when I first started, but I kind of got the hang of it, and it really made a big difference for this part. Just made it so much easier. And for some reason, when I went in with my first stitch, I was having a really hard time pulling it through. So I grabbed my little silicone thimble, and that helped me grip it better. And then I ended up taking it off in a little bit because the stitches were easy after that. It was just that first stitch gave me a little trouble. So I'm just working my way around this bun. And again, like I did with the twist at the beginning, I'm just trying to go with the angle of the twist so that it kind of hides my thread a little bit. And I just work my way around to the back, and I kind of overlap my stitches before I tie it off right under the bun, right there at the front. So I'm just removing all my pins, and I'm going to put that last stitch in. And tighten it really well. And then I'm going to put one more stitch that comes out right below the bun before I knot it. And I couldn't get my needle in there to make this knot, so I just tied the knot and held the loop close to where the yarn comes out and pulled that knot tight. And I did it twice just to make it extra secure. And then I'm going to thread that yarn thread through my long needle and just run it up through the doll's side of the doll's head to get it hidden and trim it. So I didn't have the heart to do the other side for y'all, but it's basically just the same thing as the first side. So again, I didn't want y'all to be here all day, but I really just love this little hairstyle and how it turns out. I just think it's a really sweet, and it's a good alternative, and it's just another hairstyle to add to your collection. So I hope you enjoyed this. in the end, enjoyed it. It was a struggle, but it was worth it. I just love the effect, and she's just a cute little redhead, and she looks like my mom. Honestly, my mom has red hair, but thanks, and I'll see you next time.